Good morning, everybody. I'm Martin Dangerfield. Thank you for joining us. First things first, there is an option to write some questions. So just to double prove there's somebody out there, could somebody just say hello on the right-hand side? Anybody will be wonderful. Don't be shy. I always like to do that.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Paul.
To help it out here, just here.
Loads of people.
Yay.
Yeah, okay, good. So today we're going to be talking about the impact of COVID-19 on employer branding. I'm joined with a mixture of people who are employers. We are waiting for one from Bet365. I've said earlier on that if Dan doesn't turn up, we'll be mean about him, but I'm sure he'll be here in a minute. We've got Neil Harrison and Diana and Hannah from Zoek. So Neil from NH237, Diana and Hannah from Zoek. And they wrote a white paper together, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. We've got Adele and we've got Catherine. Adele is from Handepay, and we've got Catherine from National Grid. Dan's from 365. Hopefully he'll join us in a minute. Said otherwise Catherine is bad for everybody. We shouldn't be doing it. So Neil, maybe you could open up with just talking about the white paper, something around why you did it, how you did it, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I'll talk about why we did it. If Diana and Hannah could maybe talk about how we did it in 2 seconds. I guess it's easy if you've been in recruitment for any length of time. Martin, obviously you've been in recruitment for so many years, it's not true. I mean, on that subject, it's easy to look back and use past experiences and precedents and kind of think, well, we've been here before. And during kind of recessions and what kind of that kind of thing, there's a lot to be said for that. The word unprecedented has been used an unprecedented amount of times, but there is a kind of value to it. We are in kind of foreign territory here. So using kind of preconceptions and past experiences, I just think it can expose you to all sorts of myths and false assumptions there. So what we wanted to do through this kind of research was to get up close and personal to candidate motivations, candidate views, to understand a few things like, is the recruitment market completely closed? Do candidates assume nobody's changing jobs? There's no recruitment happening at all. That clearly wasn't the case. But again, it's important you ask those kind of questions before you make assumptions about that. So we asked a whole range of people. We'll talk about kind of methodology in a second, but we wanted to understand a little bit about candidate perceptions about their experiences to date. So we focused on people who were in work right now to understand what they've been through, the extent to which they'd felt supported by their employer, their propensity to consider other employers. You know, were they just keeping their heads down, or were they of the view that, do you know what, I fancy something else, I fancy something different, and if so, what they were looking for. So that's probably the why. If I can pass on to the guys at Zirk a little bit to focus on some of the how.
Yeah, so we then went on to find out the data. So we went to ask the job seekers that we have at Zoek, around about 500,000, and a questionnaire in regards to things, how they currently are with work-wise, if they're finding that the employers were supported during COVID. And then, yeah, we came out with the findings. We also found as well.
So as Neil's already mentioned, so one of the main things that we were interested in finding out was obviously there was this assumption that the jobs market is all sort of closed, which, you know, was the case for a lot, but there was still jobs still live and still out there. So we were wanting to understand candidates' perspectives, their motivations, understand if they have a willingness to still want to go out and find new jobs. Obviously, it is a very disruptive market. Are they more inclined to stay in their current positions, or are they confident to obviously go out and still make a move? And what they're actually looking for as well in a job within this new market. So how important is progression opportunities, the company culture within new employers, and obviously the recognition that they might get within their role. So we really wanted to understand, you know, how important that is. And especially from an employer support perspective, you know, is that a key thing that candidates are looking for when they are moving jobs? I'll pass that back to yourself, Martin.
So I guess the thing we're asking, so just so people can see, if they click also at the bottom, the white paper is available. Don't go and read it now. It's 19 pages long. Get it before you go away. Also, going to ask some questions along the way. So it's interesting. I can't actually see the chat. But it's by the by. So if you've got a question, just hit the ask a question button. You see, I've actually said you can ask a question here. And throughout the conversation, we're going to be running some polls as well. So the first poll we've opened, and I noticed some of you have gone in and clicked on that. So that's brilliant as well. But we'll ask you all to do that in a second as well. I guess now, what were the main findings? It's a meaty report. It's a meaty white paper. What were for you the highlights of what you found?
Yeah, and I guess people take their own perspectives from this. And from my point of view, what I was really interested was around communication. So we asked people, to what extent did you feel you've been communicated well during either lockdown and or furlough? And actually, I was kind of really pleased that generally people felt that they'd been communicated with relatively clearly, relatively regularly. The other side of that was that people don't have much of a line of sight about the next 6 months. So what most employers haven't done terribly well is to say, this is our best guess about what the next 6 months looks like and how you can contribute and help us get over that line. So, and I guess, we are in a huge amount of ambiguity and opacity. So there's lots of doubts about that. I think how people have treated their employee base over the last 6 or so months is their employer brand moving forward, whether they like it or not. If employers are perceived to have had a good lockdown, so to speak, that will benefit their employer brand hugely. If the opposite is true, then they were going to struggle reputationally for, I suspect, years to come. We talk about stories as regards employer branding an awful lot, and people anecdotally already sharing stories. So your employer base is talking to their mates, they're talking to their loved ones, their family, and they will be talking about how well they think you guys have communicated and supported them during this lockdown. That is going on right now. And as well, if I'm considering joining an organisation, I want to understand again through your careers website the stories of how people have come through recession. How have you treated me? How have you nurtured me? How have you communicated during all that? We asked, for me, one of the most insightful questions was, we asked people, you've got two choices. Would you want to join an organisation that's pretty strong and stable right now, but treated their people poorly during lockdown, or an organisation that's maybe got some question marks about them, but who treated their people really well? And I can't remember I think it's 93%, just absolutely staggering amount of people wanted to work for an organisation, regardless of what the next 6 months looked like, regardless of stability, but who treated their people well during lockdown. And just to kind of final point, the recruitment market is definitely open. People in jobs right now have got their eyes open on their next move. And I think there's a really interesting point, lots of interesting points around progression. So people have had, in a funny way, a lot of people have had 6 months of no progression, of making no progress during their career. And I think they're looking for a next move right now, which will help them make up for the last 6 months. Absolute nutshell, there's a lot of really, for me, really interesting research in there. If you haven't downloaded it, have the opportunity to do that. But maybe now, if we open it out, particularly to Adele and Catherine, if you just give me, I suppose, a line of sight about how well you feel you guys supported your employee base over the last 6 months, any of the high points, and anything maybe you'd have done differently in terms of hindsight. Catherine?
Do you want to go first, Catherine?
Okay, I can go first.
Right,
it's fine. I think the very first thing we did to support our colleagues during lockdown, the first thing we went out and said was that we were not going to furlough anybody. So we guaranteed everyone's jobs actually for as long as we, due to COVID, was the caveat, for as long as we felt we needed to. And then put a lot of support. We ramped up tech support for working remotely, and we also ramped up support for managers and colleagues around, adapting to that remote environment, adapting to the uncertainty, adapting to leading remote teams. So a lot of that sort of wraparound support was brought in pretty quickly, actually.
And colleagues have really appreciated that. And I think we were also very clear with our communication. So regular updates from the leadership, regular updates. We appointed people who were in charge of, COVID safety during lockdown. And there were some quite extraordinary things that happened, I think, in that for our control rooms, we had to sequester people. So we had to go, well, we can't have infection in our control rooms because then the country has no, lights on, and we have to keep the lights on and the gas flowing. And that was our kind of mantra. And we have to support our people doing that. So within a few weeks, we had built a load of hotel rooms in the car park at Warwick, in National Grid House at Warwick. But not just that, but made it really nice for people and really homely, and made sure that they had catered meals and, put on. And so I think there was a lot of thought gone into not just the mechanics of how do you get a workforce working remotely, but also, as I said, how do you support people, managers, leaders, colleagues, and just a little bit of thought and care. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what National Grid did really well. And they do show that they really care and support their organisation.
Right.
That's fantastic. And you obviously communicated a whole bunch out to your people. I suppose, did that come in the other direction? Did you spend a lot of time listening to your people?
Yeah. Yes. So I think probably more than we've done before. So we did all the we're now probably a bit surveyed out, but we did do some, so surveys regularly, but also we had regular calls. And I think what we did was each leadership, the CEO, but other leadership, members of the leadership team, HR, we all did calls with our people and enabled that feedback loop to come up. And I think what's interesting is the use of technology. All of a sudden, stuff that would have taken weeks or years to get mobilised, all of a sudden we're all on Teams, and Slido's being used, which enabled people to comment anonymously or ask questions anonymously if they felt they couldn't give their name. But we took all of that feedback and you act on some of those concerns. Now, some of it, if I'm brutally honest, is a little bit, really? You're moaning about the fact that you're not going to get X or as big a bonus as maybe you did before? Good job, you're lucky, So there was some, it's been fascinating in terms of some of the behaviour, but I would say that it's been a great listening, a time for listening as well.
Adele, what's your take on that in terms of support, in terms of listening?
Well, we're a very different business from obviously the likes of National Grid. We're a lot smaller for a start. We're a relatively small business with about 200 headcount, but quite an active volume recruiter because we recruit a lot of direct salespeople. So we sell to small to medium-sized businesses. Our business market is your independent retailers, bars, restaurants, pubs, etc. So as you can imagine, in our whole industry, there was a lot of panic around March when the reality of this coronavirus started to hit. What we did was held firm, where a lot of our competitors immediately started, before furlough was introduced, started losing cost very quickly and started to panic. If you imagine when we went to lockdown, about 70% of our customers went into lockdown. And so, the machines were turned off, they were not transacting. So we furloughed a lot of people, actually. We furloughed about 140 people, of which I was one, from April. But we have brought them back in phases. So as soon as the lockdown was lifted slightly and pubs and bars could open again with restrictions in place, as soon as non-essential food retailers could open again, etc., we started to bring people back, but in phases, so that we could make sure that they were very comfortable and that they felt very safe with what they were doing. In terms of the office, obviously there was a lot of work to make that safe. We reacted, as Catherine said, we reacted very quickly in terms of getting technology in place. There was a rush to purchase a lot of laptops so that people could work from home. IT were very busy, and and we just did everything we could really to keep the momentum going and to make sure that, as you can imagine, there was a lot of customers phoning us, wanting to get support, not wanting to pay for their not wanting to pay their fees, etc., and get support with that. So there was business continuity. It was great to see that all those disaster recovery plans that sit dusty in the back of the office somewhere actually did come into fruition and actually did work. And we've still got a small portion of people on furlough, but the plan is to have them back by the 2nd of November. And our plan is, providing there's no catastrophic events within the next couple of weeks, to have everybody back from furlough and everybody back to work safely.
What could possibly go wrong? So Adele, in terms of communication and nurturing and that support, is there anything you'd have done differently?
Well, that's a difficult question for me because I was furloughed. So I came back on the 1st of September. So I wasn't part of the support mechanism, if you like. So it's difficult. I think, how was it receiving that support? We communicated all the essential information. We kept it simple. We communicated when there was something to communicate. Would I have liked it to be a bit more touchy-feely? In truth, yes, but we're not a huge organisation. We have a small HR team, and our directors were very busy keeping a business afloat and setting all the wheels in motion. So I think you've got to understand that for employers as well, this has been a really difficult time. For business owners, this is it is unprecedented. There's no formula for going through this, and everybody's kind of been learning as they go along. So I think we've done very well. We've got a lot of. You can see on our reviews, all of a sudden we've got unprompted, unsolicited reviews popping up on Glassdoor and on places like LinkedIn, talking about what a great employer we are. And I think that comes from the fact that, unlike many of our competitors, we have protected those jobs and we have, kept people furloughed where a lot of people have just let people go.
As we go along,
that's fantastic, and I think the unprecedented count is 3 so far. So we're going to look to build on that. So, can I ask both of you there? Have you or are you continuing to hire right now? And if so, are you noticing different motivations, different desires from candidate audiences?
We are. Yeah, we had a recruitment pause. During the lockdown, the early days of the lockdown, and but we were still hiring what were deemed to be critical roles, and we are still hiring. About to launch our graduate program and all that kind of stuff. So I think in terms of the attitude, I think the view is that candidates are more cautious and more risk averse, but they're also a lot more flexible in their expectations. And I think also that the attitude change of the hiring managers is that we're more flexible too. So now we've seen that people can work remote. You don't need to be in an office. There's actually a view that, well, we can be far more flexible about where we get our talent from. And the fact that we've onboarded, I don't know what the numbers are, but we've onboarded quite a few people remotely in this time means that, you can do it. And you can have a more flexible working culture. So we continue to recruit.
That's good to hear that you're not paused. That's good.
This feels like a good moment just to interrupt. Quick poll then for everybody who's watching. Are you still continuing to hire throughout the pandemic, or have you continued to hire throughout the pandemic? Some of you already answered. We've got 7 votes. So if you just go to the polls at the bottom of your screen and just click polls, and we have a yes, we continued with original hiring plans. Yes, but we adjusted. No, we paused all our recruitment plans. Or no, but we are planning to start hiring again soon. Quick random survey there. 8 votes. I'll give you. Oh, there you go. 10 votes.
Yeah.
Let's give it another 10 seconds. Oh, one for the yes, but we continued with our original hiring plan. So in summary, I don't know, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Nobody's not voted. Look, you see, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right. So with this snap poll, 46% have paused all recruitment plans. I think that, that's the majority. That's probably where I thought most people would be. Interesting that you're not. There's still that,
Yeah.
Equally, the other half of it is saying, yes, we are still hiring.
We've paused all the volume recruitment, and the reason for that is not because we don't want to recruit, because we do, but our volume recruitment piece is predominantly salespeople, and they come into a monthly training course. So it's understanding how we can safely deliver that training. Because we're not convinced that it can all be done online. It can all be done on Teams, and it's just about getting people from all over the country together in a safe venue, safely distanced, etc. So those are some of the challenges that we've got and that we need to consider before we go back to into full scale hiring. And I think again we want to get everybody back to work, everybody back working safely, feeling safe, being productive before we actually undertake the challenge of growth. But we have done a little bit of recruitment. We have done just essential roles only, and there is definitely a change in the market. There's a lot more candidates. There's a lot of overqualified candidates applying, which is very sad, but it's the state of the market. And there's a lot more caution as well. So I've had offers declined or offers withdrawn because people go away and think about it and think, actually, I'm just going to stay where I am because I don't know what's going to happen. So there is a lot more caution at the moment.
And are people like that? Are they looking? What sort of reassurance are they looking for? And I guess what sort of reassurance can you actually offer them feasibly?
Well, I mean, I've only got a couple of examples of that, to be honest with you. So we're not talking huge waves of people, but anecdotally, I think they just felt if we went into another national lockdown, what would happen? If the schools all went home and they needed to be at home, what would happen? And we try to give reassurance, but at the end of the day, we're also, we don't know exactly what's going to happen because we've not been here before, and it depends how long we're locked down for and how bad it gets. And so I think there is still a high degree of caution, and I think a lot of people that are in jobs won't jump until it feels a more secure economy to do so.
And Catherine, I guess the same sort of question for you. It is, I guess, your story, your organisation's story, feels pretty reassuring anyway, in that you're there to keep the lights on. Is that a sort of reassuring message you're delivering to people?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is very much so the message we've been delivering. I think it's difficult though, because again, even with National Grid, you can't predict what might happen in the future, and it's not just for us as well. It's not just COVID. It's other external factors like the economy. Decisions by the regulator, so those are a factor as well. But anybody who's in utilities and energy understands those, I guess. But yeah, it's very much we look after you. We're not going to. I would like to think we're not doing any hiring of any roles that would be potentially at risk.
Yeah.
Hence why we have quite a strict process of exceptions and roles being approved by the exec to hire, because to make sure that we're giving each role the proper thought, unless it's field based and unionised or what have you.
Yeah.
And I guess for both of you, what have you seen the message you take out to the marketplace? And I appreciate recruitment is quieter than it's been, but in terms of a value proposition or why, does it differ from the one you're taking to market now than it was pre-COVID?
I'm not sure that ours does, actually. I think we've always taken a very similar message out to market. Actually, I think what's made the bigger difference in our messaging is Black Lives Matter, and the increased focus on diversity. So I would say that if you look at National Grid, postings and brand work now, it's sort of over-indexed on our responsible business, on inclusion, on diversity, which potentially, I mean, was always there, but potentially has been dialed up as we shine a spotlight on our need to hire more diverse candidates, particularly at our graduate levels. So I think we've always been portrayed as a very safe environment, and now it's so that's not really changed. And I think also our message is also about some of the amazing projects we do that still have to continue.
Yeah.
Adele?
Yeah, I think our message will definitely change because I think we've come out of this. Well, we're not out of it yet, but we're emerging from it as with a much stronger reputation. Again, within our marketplace. So I think we will leverage some of that for our employer brand and look at, I'll be looking specifically for some stories about how people felt supported and what it's been like working through COVID and what support we've given people. And we'll use that to give a layer of reassurance to future candidates.
I mean, I think that the issue about stories, I mean, has long been a key part of an organisation's employer brand. I mean, Catherine, are you already taking stories from your workforce in terms of the guys who feel they've been supported and using those on your career site?
I believe so, yes. It's difficult for me to say because I'm not actually I suppose that's we have slightly different corporate affairs, very much takes ownership of that. But I would say that we are very much on our social channels trying to showcase and tell those stories. So you'll see the stories of the guys who've been looked after, who've made incredible sacrifices. There was some very moving stuff on our social media channels and on the Midlands News, actually, about the guys who'd spent 2 months away from home and then got reunited with families, but also how we looked after them. So we will definitely be using those stories to demonstrate our values, and I think we will emphasize that and yeah, as I said, tell those stories as well as telling the stories about great feats of engineering, which is also what we love to talk about as well.
Very important. I mean, I hear there's a view that your employer brand effectively, regardless whether you like it or not, is how you've behaved, how you've treated your people over the last 6 months. I guess, would you agree with that? And how do you think your respective employer brands have come through the last 6 months?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. One of the examples of that is one of our people who was working from home struggled to work from home for a variety of reasons. He didn't enjoy working from home, and it wasn't easy for him with the family setup. So he was a priority for us to bring him back and get him into the office, one of the first people, and get him back safely. And he actually wrote his own blog that he put on Facebook, which was sent to me by somebody else because I'm not friends with him on Facebook. And I think, things like that are a great example of how you've looked after people just organically grow and develop your employer brand. I'm not having to do anything. It's happening without any intervention from me. I will be doing things and I will be leveraging all those stories, but it's organically developing, which is great.
Feels like a good time for a poll. I'm just going to put that out there as well. So again, if there's a poll there again, how do you think your reputation as an employer or your employer brand has changed since March? Click a button. Click a button now. It's a bit like oh no, I won't do that joke because everybody remembers it. I'm too old then. We've got 3 votes. Give it a few more minutes. Or there's more people. There we go. More people voted last time. Okay, so without committing, that's 87% say yes, we've worked hard with our people, and I think a reputation is improved, which is again good. Maybe it's a reflection of the people on this webinar this morning. I don't think it's been that easy for everybody. I think some organisations have either had to make some really tough decisions and got it right still, but and then worse, made some tough decisions and got it wrong. It's very difficult. thing to balance. That's a very tricky path, isn't it, between business versus doing the right thing for your people. And sometimes people get out in the middle.
Yeah, and you know, we've talked about this being, I'll mention the unprecedented word again, but you know, it's really tough for employers if you've not been through this before, and then you have to show good leadership. And we know we haven't had great examples of good leadership in other areas through this pandemic either. So it's tough, and you always make mistakes. But ultimately, the way you communicate and treat your people, and often the smaller touches are the things that people will remember, and I think will continue to enhance your brand. But tough for CEOs and leadership teams to sometimes change entrenched behaviours, I would say, as well.
Yeah, I think it's been very hard as well, because I think people in leadership have struggled to know what the right thing to say is. They don't want to overpromise people. You know, they're afraid to articulate a certain message in case, you know, they then have to do a U-turn on that message. You know, they want to be as candid as possible, but they're afraid of the morale, you know, the impact on morale. So I think a lot of people in leadership roles have struggled with the communication, and sometimes, you know, some organisations have got it wrong. Some organisations have chosen to just only communicate the essentials, and I think the danger with that is, if there's a chasm of silence, then, you know, people that are at home with nothing much to do will just automatically go into a paranoid mode and will start, you know, drawing their own worst conclusions, which, you know, may not be the situation at all. So I think it's striking the balance. And I think I actually wrote about this back in March. I actually think the best thing that people can do in this situation, that employers can do, is be as frank and as honest with people as they can. Yeah. If there are difficult decisions, if there are tough times ahead and difficult decisions to be made, I think people will get on board with that and understand it if those decisions are explained, if those choices, if those challenges are shared. Whereas I think, you know, not discussing it just leads people to draw the worst conclusions about you, and about, you know, I think you've got to keep the communication simple, but I think you've got to make it human, and I think you've got to remember the human cost in all of this.
That's true. Sorry, I do have a question for you, Adele, obviously, because you've been furloughed. Do you think you've had the same amount of communication for those that have been still working, but working from home, you know, or do you think the people that have been continue to work have had more communication with regards to, obviously, when you'll be back in the office? Or
it's a good question. I don't actually know, because I haven't been there, so I don't know. I would imagine the people that were back in the office before I went back to the office had communication around our COVID rules and regulations and social distancing and all of that, and, you know, the health and safety aspects, which obviously I got that when I returned to work. So I don't know. I think we've had as much communication as employees as the company felt they could give us. But I obviously I do a lot of work on LinkedIn, and have seen a lot of examples of employers just not communicating, you know, great chasms of silence for months on end. And I think, you know, that's really poor, and it's really bad for people's mental health and anxiety. You know, unfortunately, you know, I don't work for an employer that's done that. So, you know, I feel very blessed that I've been in the position that I've been in.
Yeah,
I'm not sure whether. I don't know. I have to ask my colleagues.
Okay.
Well, for me, one of the really with the research was about how people very much tie in, I guess, working normality and their mental health, and the quicker, the more efficiently we get back to whatever normality means these days, I think it will make such a difference to people's mental health. Can I ask you guys, I suppose, and I think, Catherine, you already briefly touched on this, in terms of a return to work, how have you communicated that, but what differences have you seen introduced? So people, I've spoken a lot about working from home where that's possible, but in terms of how your workplace now looks and feels different.
I'm back in the Strand today, I'll answer the last bit first in a way. How does it look and feel different? It's weird because there's a sense of it feels terribly normal to be back in an office, and it just so happens I've picked a day when there are a few of us in, but only in HR. So my boss is in, a couple of my colleagues, etc. The rest of the building is absolutely empty, and I think that's the thing. If I was here on my own, I'd rather be at home.
Yeah.
Because it's just, you come to an office for the atmosphere, the ability to bump into people. So I think that's one of the things we've missed is working remotely has, for me as because I'm relatively new at National Grid as well, and I've got dispersed teams, has been brilliant because I've actually built better relationships with my team. And I think we work far better having all worked remotely than we did before. But we've all missed that interaction of bumping into that person who you wouldn't normally just pick up the phone to or arrange a meeting, and that's been missing. But of course, it doesn't naturally happen when only some of you come back into the office because it's deserted.
Yeah.
So that's kind of tricky. I think I've forgotten the rest of the question. Sorry.
So now, are you guys looking to? I think you talked about hand sanitizers, but if I walked into National Grid in the Strand right now, what kind of provision have you made around COVID?
So we've so first of all, you have to do a bit of a tutorial at home around the practices in the office, and then you have to say that you've completed it before your pass gets activated. So all passes were deactivated, and you can only come in if you've read the instructions. And there's one-way systems, there's hand sanitizers. You have to book a desk, so you can't just come into the office and sit down anyway. You have to book a desk. We are at 20% capacity. There are toilets out of action, there are desks out of action, there are meeting room limitations. So I'm in a meeting room, but because I wanted it for this hour, I have to have it for the whole day. There's more people cleaning, so there's people walking around with cleaning products, cleaning everything. We stripped out tea, coffee, cups, everything. The coffee's come back in because we kind of we've really got to allow people to have a mug of coffee.
Thank goodness for that.
So those are some of the differences, and the biggest difference is that it's just empty. There's just nobody here. And I think Warwick's a bit different. I think there's a few more people there. Our US offices, we haven't gone back at all. So, and the way that we've said it is, in the beginning, it was when lockdown started to ease, we kind of said, if you have a real need to go back to the office for mental health, for any other reasons you can't be at home, then let us know and we'll let you come back in. Of course, those people then got to the office and realised that it was quite a miserable environment because there was nobody there. So it wasn't any better. Then we started to try and encourage people back in to say, we've made it reassuring people about how safe it was. Many of our people in Warwick commute by car, so they're quite safe. London was different. We acknowledged that people won't be happy on the tube, etc. And then, of course, the advice switched again because when Boris then said, no, we would really like you all to work from home, we kind of went, okay, you come in if there's a business need or a personal need, but we'll leave it up to you, which is quite our National Grid, actually. We're quite command and control at times. So we've just gone, leave it up to you.
I echo that exactly. We've done exactly the same thing. We've probably got more people in the office than 20% capacity, but very safely distanced. Meeting rooms are not meeting rooms anymore, they're workspaces so that we can spread people out more. But all the measures, all the one-way systems, the sanitisation, when you can't make somebody a cup of tea. They can make their own tea, but you can't make them a cup of tea. All the things, the one-way system, all the things that Catherine said, we've done exactly the same thing. And it does feel very safe in the office, to be honest with you. I'm here because I can be, because I'm somebody who can work from home without it impacting on what I do. But, I could go into the office and still feel very safe.
I think what the office is going to look like in the future is a big debate, is a different question.
Yeah, especially with the work from home, where people continue to work from home and some days in the office, some days from work from home.
I now don't see the point of coming into an office and sitting at a desk and not interacting with anybody. which I never did, but do you know what I mean? You can do that at home if you can.
Yeah.
I mean, there are obviously.
But do you think the workplace will lose an awful lot now if we're not collaborating, if not bumping into people at the coffee machine or the water cooler? So I've met you, Catherine, in certain working situations where there's lots of hustle, there's lots of bustle, there's lots of chat going on, and that's quite inspiring. I'd imagine lots of ideas, get produced that way. Do we think some critical things are going to be lost in the medium term from the workplace?
Yeah, I think they will. And I think you'll end up with more uncertainty because you're not having those coffee machine chats, maybe less innovation, less sharing, less collaboration. So we're going to have to find another way of doing it. It could create more. It could actually, on a different tack, create innovation because, we could, you might find people coming up with new ways of ensuring that we retain that contact, or we end up with offices that just look very different, that become just collaboration spaces. I've heard that talked about.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it's something we need to look out for. Depends how long this goes on for, doesn't it?
Adele?
Well, I think I really hope that we can get back to some kind of normality where, we can have work spaces back in the office and people can feel part of a team again. Because I think that's definitely one of our our field roles are obviously they're lone workers to an extent, but our head office team are very much, some of the things that have come out of our engagement surveys are that they feel part of a family. Handepay is a family, and they feel, they love the people that they work with, and they get a lot of satisfaction out of the people that they work with. So I think there's a danger of that being lost. If everybody has to work remotely, then I think it, as great as the technology is and as great as people can, as good communication as people can give, it can be hard to still retain that sort of family feel. We also ran a lot of engagement events. So we had a working party called The Only Way is West Way, which is our head office day, TOWIE, but with a W, and like what we did. And we used to run regular sort of events, and we'd have a barbecue in the car park, and we'd have an ice cream van turn up in the summer, and World Fish and Chip Day. We had a fish and chip van come, and we'd get people together and have a little celebration at lunchtime or after work. And obviously that's all stopped. We've not been able to do any of that since COVID. So, one of the things that I need to do now I'm back at work is pick that up again with the marketing and HR teams to look at, how do we translate that online? How do we translate this now to remote workers, which, any ideas, please send them on an email.
I agree. I think it's very important, actually, obviously, to keep the morale as well. Obviously, you're not in the office, let's keep the morale online. Like with the white paper, we found out that I think it was 83% of people said that they would feel happier to be going back to a work environment, that everything's back to normal, which is a good percentage, really.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on you. There's a lot of talk about hybrid working and how I think people are starting to actually want a balance, that they do want to come back to the office and have that sense of normality, but also they know the importance of, having those remote working days, keeping distance, or rotating staff, for example. I think it's just going to be a case of gradually getting back to normal. It's not just going to go back overnight, and that'll help with people's mental health and stuff like that.
I don't know. I think also it depends on what your old normal was, whether you want to go back to it or not. Because personally, I think there's a lot of us, particularly who commute from into big cities. Frankly, I don't want the old normal again. I really don't. Getting up this morning at 6:15 in the dark. To get on a train at 7 and in a mask was mask doesn't matter. It was hot. I just thought, oh God, I used to do this every day. What? Why?
Well, but I think it's very much a personal choice, isn't it? Because there are some people who are trying to work at home with young children or have
nightmare.
I mean, who say, you know what, it's not been too bad, and I think, nah, it has.
But I think what this says is that as employers, we just have to think more about our people and be more flexible.
Yeah.
And so it's never going to be one size fits all again.
No.
I mean, so many of these ways of working rules will be more relaxed and more, and actually maybe people will start to think more about each other and their individual circumstances and how comfortable they are. Because actually when you create that environment and allow people that flexibility to work in the best way for them, you get more out of them.
I think trust. Actually. I think the whole having forced lockdown, having forced working from home has actually assisted many employers in being able to trust their workforce. Yeah. Whereas there was huge question marks around trust for lots and lots of employers. And I think now they've seen that actually people are grown-ups and can behave, can be trusted, then hopefully that will change. The whole flexible working thing that used to be, for the few, will, going forward will now be for the many, and it will just become a regular thing that people do. So those employers who were like, hey, our USP is that you can work from home, you can work flexibly. It's not really a USP anymore, is it?
I'm going to have to rethink their employer brand.
Yeah. You know what? I feel like a poll coming on. There's a poll invisible, which is have you or do you offer remote working options in your workplace for new hires? It's also just to see if there's anybody still out there. I can see there's people on the thing, but I do like to make sure they haven't fallen asleep. There we go. There's people alive, which is good news.
I guess some places you can't offer that because depending on the job role itself as well.
Yeah.
But also we said for in our US business we have call centers because we have a consumer business, and they for a long time we said, you can't do contact centers remotely, and it's going to take us 2 years to get the contact centers remote. I think it took 4 weeks. 4 weeks or less. 80% of the call center was at home. I don't think there's any plan. Why would you then drag them all back into an office if they're operating well from home? So I agree. I know some people who are in jobs where they have had to travel into the office through lockdown, IT, networking. A lot of our support guys have been here the whole time.
The flip side of that is there's lots of stories out there though now about employers implementing monitoring devices, and there's lots of spyware going on, and it is quite a frightening thing, to be honest with you. And I think what a way to actually ruin your employer brand overnight is by introducing lots of technologies.
I think me and Neil actually awkwardly know somebody that's done that. He doesn't know that he's done that, but I know that he's done that, and Neil knows he doesn't know that. The employees don't know they've done that, and that's the thing. I think you're absolutely right. The brand will be destroyed if they find out, but the employees don't know.
I think it says a lot about you as an employer. If you feel that you need to do that, I think it says more about you and your own trust issues than anybody else.
The individuals back. It's about that ultimate kind of control of, I need to see my people. If they're not sat at a desk, how can they be working? How can they be working for me? Definitely that. And I think people have lost a little bit of that.
Yeah.
One of the interesting points was around innovation, and people were questioning whether that would exist or that would be harder to achieve. But the same token, what we've just been talking about is the speed that people have achieved certain things. I think, Catherine, you're talking about getting a call centre up in kind of record time, and kind of bigger picture, you've had things like the Nightingale hospitals, which went up in a staggeringly short amount of time. The drive to the vaccines, and there's lots of question marks over those. But the progress they've made is, again, unprecedented. It must be at least 10 by now, but that's been staggering. So what's possible, what's impossible, in a way, is kind of been redefined.
Yeah, absolutely.
We also it was quite interesting watching the different approaches in countries. So our US versus UK business. So if I take our internships, we do a few in the UK and decided that we wouldn't run them this year. But in the US, they went, we're still going to run them. We're going to do them virtually, and we're going to do them bigger and better. So, we took on nearly 200 interns, and we took them all on, recruited, and they worked virtually for the summer, and hugely successful. And the impact of that was that we got more diversity, interestingly, because we weren't limited to the Massachusetts, New York area, which is where we are in the US. All of a sudden, we were recruiting interns from Chicago and all over the US, because they didn't have to be in the office.
Yeah.
And that was just someone going, I'm sure we can do this virtually. I'm sure there's a way. And then they just, made it happen, which was great. And that's what I hope for. That's what I really hope for when it comes to innovation, that people start to question, well, hang on a minute, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we've got a few questions.
Do you think there's a... Sorry,
we've had a few questions come in.
Yeah, they've been out there. So the real one for me was the as we move from reacting to settling into new ways of working. Is anything in the research that Catherine and Adele's experienced about different ways of communicating, so different channels and styles? We may have covered some of that. And actually, the other one I'd like to go back to is for James as well. So 2 questions, and then probably wrap up. So first of all, that one. Is there something you could pass on to people about how you've communicated internally, about how you've perhaps changed a little bit around your current situation?
I think that's maybe one for Catherine, because I've not really been out in that communication.
How we've communicated with people internally. What's different? Was that the question?
Basically, what have you gone a different approach because people are sat at home rather than being sat in the office?
Yeah, I think so. I think we are. It's made us realise just how much more communication you need to do. So if you think you're doing enough, do more, because you're never doing enough. And I still don't think we've got it absolutely right. But we've definitely changed. I think there's more town hall type things as well, but discussions with using new technology like Slido. We had our first all-colleague webcast from our CEO, which was fascinating to me. That's the first time they'd done it, but also still allowed people to ask questions that were streaming on the webcast, which was fascinating, looking at all the questions. And I suppose we're still... Yammer has come into its own. I think we've seen increased engagement on Yammer. And then also just getting leaders to talk more to their people. But I think very personally about my communication, I have more team meetings, more team calls, more one-to-ones. What's been really interesting though is in the beginning it's really formalized. It was really formalized, and it was everything went in the diary, and it was all a Teams call, and then everyone forgot to just pick up the phone to each other and have a chat.
Yeah.
And so I think we're seeing a swing more to, I'm just going to pick up the phone and have a chat.
Yeah. We've got that many different communication platforms now. People are literally ringing me on 3 or 4 different platforms at one time. It's like, really? How did you influence your leaders, Catherine, to communicate better with their people?
I think we just told them what to do. No, I think there's leading by example as well. I think there's a lot of so some leading by example from the senior leadership, and then encouraging people, and it just sort of happened. I think people actually just realized, I've got to just talk to my people more. And then giving them some of the support and tips and that sort of thing has been really helpful, and just reinforcing the message in every piece of communication that we do. Cascade this, talk to your teams, all of that kind of thing. So, but there is an element sometimes if you just got to tell people you need to be talking to your teams more.
Yeah.
I think on the basis that it's 3 minutes to 12, has anybody got anything more they'd like to say? Otherwise, I think we're going to wrap up. Neil, have you got a final thought?
No, I'd just like to say thanks for everybody. Catherine, Adele, it's been nice catching up with you guys again. Not spoken to you for a little while, but it's really, really important insights, and it's great to see the research that Zirk and ourselves did actually come to light, if you like. It can feel a little bit dry, and until you all of a sudden you counterpoint that with your own experiences, which, you know, it's great to see. It actually doesn't contradict it, but it backs it up, and there's a lot of synergy around that. Yeah. So thanks hugely for your time. Hopefully it's an hour well spent. Thanks massively to the guys at Zirc. I think, you know, this call, this kind of interaction wouldn't have happened without exposure to your database. So that's massively appreciated, but really interesting hour. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
For all of those watching, don't forget you can click on the white paper. It'll still be there even when we've all gone away. You can watch again if you missed a bit, and this will be out on the YouTube channel as well. That's RCIRCLE. Bit of a plug for RCIRCLE there as well. We've got lots of lovely content out on YouTube. You can have a look at hours of content. There's some interesting stuff coming up as well in the next few weeks. With that, thank you everybody. Thank you, Adele. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Diana. Thank you so much, Neil. And we'll all see each other again very, very soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.